I got St. Lucia citizenship back in 2017, 2018, and it's a great part of my passport portfolio. It gives me a lot of extra options. But many people do not understand why I chose St. Lucia, and today I want to help you avoid choosing the wrong second passport. One of the things that I hear from Nomad Capitalist clients who have already gotten citizenship by investment before they come to us is a feeling of, here it is, and so now what? We've even gotten calls from people who got citizenship by investment, renounced their citizenship without our help, and then they're calling like, hey, I just renounced. Like, what should I do now? You seem to know what you're talking about in this regard. And so I want to prevent that happening from you because there's some podcast out there that I was on back in like 2016 where I got a passport from a new country delivered to my door. You can hear DHL knocking on my door, and I said, hey, I got to go get this. You're just recording this for later. Let me go get the passport, and you can hear me kind of bringing it back. But I knew how that passport fit into my strategy. There was no, and now what? And so I want to help you avoid that because what I've seen is there is about a 9-fold increase in Americans who have gotten St. Lucian citizenship in recent years. And I would like to think that us talking about it and my showing you how I've gotten St. Lucia citizenship actually contributed to that. But St. Lucia is one of the 5 Caribbean citizenship by investment programs. As a standalone second passport, may be the least attractive for many people. And I'll tell you why. But first, let me show you my personal travel map. This is where I can travel anywhere in the world. You can see that when I gave up U.S. citizenship, I gave up the ability, without getting a visa, to go to a small handful of countries. I also added a handful of countries that I would not have had access to as an American to my list. And so that's the power of second passports. Obviously, if going to the U.S., Canada, Australia, New Zealand is important to you, we would help you with a strategy that would focus on an EU passport, Malta citizenship program, citizenship by descent, any number of other options for that. But this is where I can go, okay? And so a few of these countries were added by St. Lucia that I wouldn't have access to otherwise, and they complemented the countries that I couldn't go to. So I had other passports, and like let's take South America, for example. Right, what St. Lucia offers, maybe 1 or 2 of those I wouldn't have had somewhere else. And I've actually traveled around South America and had to kind of switch passports. Generally, I like to get on the plane with one, leave the country with one, get on the plane, go to the next country, use the same passport. It's a little cleaner, but it doesn't always work that way. And so there's countries where I can go where it's like, hey, this one's a St. Lucia country. There's some where it's both can get in, and there's some where St. Lucia can't get in. But it complemented where I can go. Now, for me, at the time when I got that passport, I said, hey, I want to be able to go to pretty much anywhere that I want. I don't really necessarily need to go to the U.S., Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Those were the ones that were kind of least on my list. But, hey, I need access to everywhere I can go. If you don't care about that, then there may be a different equation. Now, St. Lucia does not, it's like the only one now that can't go to Russia. Probably not a top priority for many Westerners. It's one of only a couple that can't go to China. Again, right now, probably not a priority for a lot of Westerners, but we have had clients that say, hey, I do business in Eastern Europe. I want some of those Eastern European countries to go and meet my developers, for example, and I can't go there now easily as an American. So that would be a unique consideration for you. And so you've got to figure out, number one, where you need to go. If you don't already have another citizenship, are you planning on keeping your current citizenship? Is this just a backup? What are you going to do about it? And so also at the time, number one, wasn't as financially successful. So I said, hey, I'll just get one of the cheapest ones, St. Lucia, Dominica, $100,000 for a single. I was not married at the time, and so St. Lucia had a cleaner path where you can add a future spouse for $35,000. I eventually went and did that. It's cheaper and more streamlined to do that in St. Lucia than Dominica. If you're already married, if you already have kids, you could probably get a better deal by going to some of the other countries, right? St. Kitts and Nevis has a deal in the first half of 2023. Antigua has consistently had kind of a buy one, get 3 free package where it's one price for a family of 4. Now, Antigua has their own issues in terms of processing efficiency. They were one of the strictest during COVID. You've got to determine what's important to you. But if I was married, if I had kids, if I didn't have other passports, I would not have gone for St. Lucia. I also, again, wasn't as financially successful. So if you're saying, hey, listen, $30,000 extra is not a big deal, I was probably a little bit short-sighted in that regard. I think St. Lucia actually fits very well into what I did. I probably wouldn't have gotten anything more by spending more money. And it's just the name's kind of cool too. But, if you have any of those things that are different than I do, then you probably should consider some other passport. And so here's the question I want to ask you when you're looking at a second passport, okay? If you're getting citizenship by investment, which means, number one, you don't have to move. You get a passport in a matter of months. You go through a due diligence process. There's a lot of paperwork to handle, something that Nomad Capitalist does for our clients. We do a lot of the heavy lifting that other folks don't do. You want to get a citizenship without having to go anywhere. In the case of Saint Lucia, you never have to go ever. That could change in the future, but if you were to get it now, I think you'll be grandfathered in. You can just do it from the comfort of your own home. You don't have to move anywhere, wait years, learn a language. You don't have to be lucky enough to have someone in your family tree. This is for someone who wants fast. They don't want to screw around. They don't want to deal with bureaucracy. They just want to get it going. Citizenship by investment. And the 5 ones in the Caribbeans are kind of the most common, most affordable ones. I spent $100,000. You might spend 100, 125, 130, 150. Do you want to spend that amount of money on a book that you can look at? They are fun to look at. I do enjoy that. Why are you looking at that book? You looking at your stamps again? Yes, I am looking at my stamps again. But do you want just the book, or do you want the book to serve you? This is what people miss, okay? I built Nomad Capitalist, and I'm a firm believer in you need a plan. You have a reason why you want a second passport. It may be you want asset protection, in which case just having the second passport doesn't help you. People often think, now that I'm Saint Lucian, I can go and get a bank account in Saint Lucia. Maybe you can. In many of the islands you can't unless you actually go and live there and really connect with the island. Those smaller countries' banks are very particular who they take. And by the way, the banks in St. Lucia, for example, there's not many left in that part of the world, but the banks there are not your best banks, right? Now, there will be some banks that are going to say, yeah, we don't really want these Caribbean citizens. I've heard a few stories of those, but generally speaking, they don't care, right? If you're still American, they may not want Americans, but you're not going to get a bank account there. You're going to open up a world of possibilities that now you've got a passport that your current country can't control. Now you've got a country you can live in that treats you better. If you want a country where you can live in directly with no taxes, you're not choosing St. Lucia. St. Lucians can go and spend all the time they want in, let's say, St. Kitts and Nevis. But hey, I think that'll probably last in perpetuity, but who knows, right? And so if you want that access to a zero tax island and you think St. Kitts is the one, that might be your passport. So these are the kinds of questions, right? If you want to buy a book, buy my book. It's like $13, and you will have the same amount of fun, and you'll get more good stories out of that book than just holding a passport book. So what I want to answer is, once you get your passport, now what? Because I think a lot of people get confused about this, and they get really caught up in the shiny objects. Again, Nomad Capitalist focuses on, I want asset protection, or I want better banking, or I want lower taxes. Just getting citizenship in the Caribbean does not lower your taxes. You can't be like, I'm no longer American, even though I'm living in the US, like, don't call me an American. It doesn't work that way, okay? And so what Nomad Capitalist does is, we're not going to sell you a passport if it's like your goal is to not pay tax. We're going to say, well, here's what you actually need to do. Maybe you don't even need, I've told people, you don't even need a second passport for what you're trying to do. And they're like, oh, you just saved me $100,000. Like, I didn't, yeah, thanks. If you call one of these firms that just sells passports, they're going to sell you a passport. That's their goal. They got one thing to sell you. Like, we got steaks in the back of the van. You want a steak? I'm a vegetarian. Steak. We don't do that, all right? And that's why I think having a plan for what you're going to get rather than buying a shiny object, I see too many people who had no clue what they were going to get, and they might have got a different passport or gone down a different path to citizenship or done none of it at all to serve the actual needs they have. So now what? Number one, what can you get with a second passport? You can live in that country, okay? If you're St. Lucian, you can go and live in St. Lucia. Now, with the Caribbean, you do not have to, but you can. Now, if you're going to live there, obviously you have to find real estate. Who do you trust for that, right? Are you going to renovate? Like, what are you going to do, okay? You can travel as their citizen. Now, if you're in the United States, for example, you're supposed to, you have to enter the U.S. as an American. You're supposed to leave. There's no exit controls, but you're, leaving as an American. But when you get to Europe, or when you get to, Chile, or when you get to, wherever you're going, of those, 100 and some countries you can go to as a St. Lucian or an Antiguan or whatever else, you can use that passport to arrive. Now, obviously, you can't go to all the same countries. There's some that you can't go to. And there's some that you can go to that are extra, for example, on these other passports. But you can travel as their citizen. And if you're going to a country where both of them need a visa, you can go and do that. You can get a residence permit as a citizen of St. Lucia, and that may be easier. So I have residence in Malaysia. And when you do so as a U.S. citizen, it is rather laborious. They involve the U.S. Embassy. I forget, it's a little bit of a pain. I mean, we've figured out how to handle that for our clients, but it is a little bit more work. They only ask for one passport, though. So you could say, hey, I'm Saint Lucian. I'm going to get my documents from that, and hey, here I am as a Saint Lucian. You should never lie and say I'm not American, but some countries, they only care, like, just show us which passport you want to come in on. And therefore, getting residence may be easier. Obviously, if something were to happen to your U.S. passport, if they restrict your travel, if you want to give it up at some point, it's better to have the residence in the country's passport that you would keep. I had Mexican residence once as an American. I got it, and literally within a week later, I was leaving the country to go and expatriate. And that Mexican residence was lost because that's generally how it works in Latin America. You can't really switch it after the fact. Other countries you can, generally not in Latin America. And so it would have been better had I applied under the other one. But I learned the hard way, and that's the kind of knowledge we pass on to you, that when the person says, well, they kind of like Americans more, it's not really a big difference, honestly. And I should have trusted my gut. I learned the hard way, and now we advise our clients accordingly. You can renounce if you're an American or if you're another citizen of any country and you don't want to be a citizen of that country, whether it's for tax reasons, whether you just don't like the country, whether you think something bad is coming, you can renounce, and then you can only be the new citizenship. You can open a bank account with your new passport. But again, if you're an American, you're going to have to disclose you're an American, and you should do that. And it's going to say in your passport if you were born in the U.S., and everyone's going to know you've had a U.S. passport at one point, if not now, right? Prove to us you're not American. But you can open a bank account with that. But it's not all it's cracked up to be, right? And there's some banks that don't want Caribbean citizens. Now, if you get a second passport, from your great-grandmother in Hungary, then there's other banks that will or won't want Hungarians, right? You can also make investments. This is generally more for crypto folks where they don't really care which passport. It's not about whether you're U.S. It's just show us a passport. But if you're locked out of certain investments as an American that you can't make, that may just be an issue with being American. So I go back to you can renounce. So those are the things that you can do with a second passport. What can you not do? You will not pay taxes just because you have a second passport. If you're an American, you've got to leave, in which case you can lower your taxes, maybe eliminate them. But you can only thoroughly get out of the system by expatriating, which a second passport allows you to do. However, if you're just going to live in the US or live in Canada or live in Germany, you are a resident of that country and they are going to tax you. A country like Singapore or Panama may only tax you on your local income. A country that has a lump sum system may say pay us a flat amount. A country, which you probably wouldn't have, a country, there's many different tax systems where you could potentially reduce that, but wherever you live determines where you pay tax, okay? The US also determines by citizenship. But again, you can reduce that as an American just by using offshore strategies. You cannot use that country's tax system in yours. You cannot say, I live in Australia, I set it up as a Saint Lucian citizen. Doesn't work, right? You live in Australia, Australian rules apply to the company that you as the beneficial owner, you as the shareholder, you as the guy working in their control. So you cannot simply say that tax system of my citizenship works where I'm at. You cannot open a bank account in the country just because you're a citizen in most cases. Now, if you're doing some of the European citizenship by descent, which we help people with, then you can oftentimes do that. But a lot of times they want to see, where's your address? Banks really want to know, are you connected to our country in some ways? And oftentimes citizenship is not enough, especially if they know you just got citizenship through an investment program and you really have no other connection. And you also can't spend double the time in places like the Schengen area of Europe because you use one passport for 90 days and then leave and then come back on the other one. Visa policies in terms of how long you can spend in a country apply to you as the person, not to the passport. So those are things that you can't do. And so what I want you to understand is if you're getting citizenship, and if you're looking at me and saying he got St. Lucian citizenship, I also got 4 other citizenships. And so you would have to understand that mix works for me. I like to talk to some of my friends and say, oh, you're probably like the only, Uzbek, Canadian, Armenian, you're probably the only one of that. And so I'm probably the only one with my mix, and you'll be maybe the only one with your mix. If you get a couple of them, I think having 3 is probably a good number for true diversification. Beyond that, you're just kind of having some fun. But this is part of a bigger plan, okay? Just having one book of a Caribbean passport is not going to change your life. Now, if you get citizenship by descent in Europe, that is going to maybe have a bigger impact because you might be more likely to go and live there. The passport is a little bit easier in terms of you could give up the U.S. passport and come back theoretically. Your kids can study in Europe. Their kids can have it. Their kids can have it. There are pros and cons to each. And that's why we started helping people only with citizenship by descent. We won't help you with tax. We won't do your banking, but we'll just help you get Italian, Hungarian, Slovak, Polish, whatever citizenship, if that's in your family tree. But still, you want to understand what's your bigger plan. If you have a second passport and you like that one better, maybe you want to have a residence permit in that passport, right? Sign up for the residence or switch your residence that you got in some other country to that passport in case something happens to the first, which if you trusted the first enough, you wouldn't have gotten the second, but we don't trust the first, right? You might want to buy a holiday home in that country to kind of ease in. You won't have to pay tax just because you're spending a little bit of time there in most cases, right? I would also spend time, if you get a second passport, especially like a Caribbean one, travel the world with that passport and see how they treat you and see how it's probably not that much different. Get a visa. Again, not to your own country, but get a visa to just a third country and see what the process looks like. I probably wouldn't be an American getting a Canadian visa. That's not really going to work. But if you're going to, Morocco or something, if you're going on a safari, get a visa in your new second passport. And so these are all the kinds of questions that I would ask. Please do not follow me saying I got St. Lucia, because I told you my criteria, and they're probably different, at least in some aspect, than yours. But I want you to understand why I think having a whole plan is important, because there's lots of people out there who are spending a six-figure sum for passports that they shouldn't have gotten. They should have chosen something different, or maybe they didn't even need it all because they chose to hire a salesman and not someone who said, let's look at this holistically. That's what Nomad Capitalist does, and those are the things that should factor into your decision.